Chairman Jordan may believe that everyone on this committee has amnesia, because for the last 18 months, almost every time we have come into this room, we've been promised evidence of crimes that'll impeach President Biden. Over and over, noun, verb, impeachment. And President Biden has been subjected to the worst accusations. He and his family have been called the worst, and you've been promised the most as it relates to what's going to be delivered. I think it's cute. It's adorable that we're having this hearing now on oversight of the border, and we're going to go back in time and question whether the vaccine for COVID really worked. That's great. But we're not going to erase what was promised to the American people because Chairman Jordan doesn't have the goods. We've got the goods. We've got the receipts, and I want you to know what you were promised and what you're now going to be given is something completely different. So, Joe Biden sold out emergency fuel reserves to a Chinese company tied to Hunter Biden. That's an impeachable offense, said Judiciary Committee member Andy Biggs. President Biden himself may have committed impeachable offenses relating to treason, bribery, or other crimes, says Congressman Jody Arrington. His actions as vice president are a blatant crime and an impeachable offense. The tragedy is Washington has known about these crimes for years and done nothing, says motion to vacate author Marjorie Taylor Greene. Certainly, impeachable acts have been committed by President Biden, says Clay Higgins. All these are impeachable offenses, and to my Republican colleagues who say, no, it's not, that's maladministration, they're wrong, Rep. Chip Roy. Paul Gosar says Joe Biden obstructs Hunter Biden's cooperation with impeachment inquiries, speaking of subpoenas, add obstruction of justice to the list of impeachable offenses committed by Joe Biden. Greg Murphy, I don't throw around the word impeachment lightly. I don't throw around the word impeachment lightly. But in my view, President Biden has committed two major impeachable offenses. Doug LaMalfa says, Joe Biden obstructs Hunter Biden's cooperation with impeachment inquiries, speaking of subpoenas, add obstruction of justice to the list of impeachable offenses committed by Joe Biden. And James Comer, he's got a couple doozies. Overwhelming evidence shows President Biden lied to the American people about his knowledge of and participation in his family's corrupt international and domestic business schemes. And then he said, this is the guy who's in cahoots with Chairman Jordan to impeach Joe Biden. I mean, there's no doubt that Joe Biden committed impeachable offenses. Sounds like there's some doubt. It sounds like there's some doubt. 18 months in, and we're now 2+ months from the last hearing they've had on this. They won't declare it dead because they need the smear to perpetuate all the way into the election. They just want a cloud hanging over President Biden because they work as a law firm on behalf of the former twice impeached President Trump. Every day, the House of Representatives has worked as the largest law firm in Washington, D.C. on behalf of just one client. And they brought all of this nonsense into this room, promising evidence of impeachment. And they've delivered zero. But you know who has actually delivered? The FBI. Because they keep arresting the best witnesses they have for their own work on behalf of Russia and China. So they bring these witnesses, they make these allegations, and the FBI says, actually, the guy that you're relying on, he's been telling you lies that have been fed by Russia. Their own Intelligence Committee chairman, this is a Republican, said that most of the claims going on in this building about Russia on their side is Russia propaganda being filtered to them by the Russians. So I don't expect you're going to hear the autopsy report on their impeachment investigation. But the president certainly deserves to hear this. In light of Republicans producing absolutely zero on impeachment. Let's just declare from here forward until they put up some evidence that Joe Biden has been acquitted of every single MAGA smear. Acquitted. It's over. They're over for impeachment. They tried to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, and it took a second serve. They tried, their own side voted against it. They had to bring one of their members, poor guy is suffering from cancer. They bring him out of his treatment to come in to deliver the one vote majority they need to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, and then it goes nowhere in the Senate. It was a second serve impeachment. It was embarrassing. And now this hearing today is about the border. We want to help fix the border. In fact, the second most conservative member of the Senate, according to the American Conservative Union, is James Lankford of Oklahoma, the second most conservative member of the Senate. He has the crazy idea that we should surge resources to the border, put more judges there to adjudicate claims of asylum, give the president the authority to shut down the border if it's being overwhelmed. And the president, in good faith, engages. Many Democrats, including myself, in good faith, engage. And then Donald Trump realizes, wait, if we solve the border crisis, I can't politicize the border crisis. And so he tells them, don't pass that bipartisan legislation. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican, said, I'm not giving up. This is not about Trump, and it's not about me. It's about our country. Senator Todd Young from Indiana said, I hope no one is trying to take this away for campaign purposes. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, said, how does Trump know it's a betrayal if he hasn't read it? I mean, don't be ignorant, read the bill. And James Lankford, the author of the bill, said, it's interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. And now, it's interesting. A few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want to change in law because it's a presidential election year. One side wants the fix, one side wants the fiction. That's entirely what this is about. So we'll engage you in this exercise, and you can send your letters about what you'd like to see on the border, but we actually stand ready to get things done. What you're seeing today is not oversight. It's overkill. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other. Thank you, Ms. Butow. We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. Recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Butow, since the beginning of the 118th Congress, the committee has sought information regarding criminal illegal aliens allowed entry into the United States. These requests languished with DHS for months, despite committee staff following up with DHS regularly. As a result, the committee ultimately subpoenaed DHS for these materials on December 8th of 2023. Of the 14 A files DHS is compelled by the subpoena to produce, only 11 have been provided. Despite the committee's subpoena production deadline lapsing on January 8th, 2024, DHS has failed to produce the remaining A files, citing the, quote, corruption, unquote, of the documents as an excuse to committee staff in April of 2024. When did DHS begin the process of responding to the committee's June 9th, July 31st, and September 14th requests?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. With respect to the A files, the department responds to each congressional request we receive, whether it's a document production, a letter, et cetera. The department always responds. With respect to the A files in particular, they don't all live in the same place. So it is a time-consuming process, whether it's a file that lives with CBP versus ICE, et cetera. So at the time that we would have received the initial request, that would have began the process of working with the components to identify where information resides, and some of these files are incredibly large, so that is a time-consuming process.
So you're stating that you began the process when you received the initial request?
Anytime we receive a request, that is when we begin the accommodations process, plus the identification process, which I think is a slightly different.
because you know my kids like to wait until the last minute to do their homework. Can you state with absolute certainty that it was before the committee's December 8th, 2023 subpoena?
Yes.
Has the department compiled the remaining A files that are due to the committee?
So I would like to first thank your staff. We have been in constant communication with regards to the A file, and we've become in a process of prioritizing some of these files. Some of the files are incredibly large, some of them are smaller. So we have, I believe, as recently as this week, continued to push some of the ones that were more of a manageable size, and we will continue to do so.
So you're still pulling relevant documents?
Yes.
Can you commit to producing the remaining A files by May 17th?
Mr. Chair, I think it would be irresponsible for me to commit to a date when I cannot identify each particular file and where each particular document is. What I can commit to is aggressively working with our team to be responsive to the committee's requests.
So you can't give me a date today?
I don't believe that, recognizing that I'm under oath, I would love to say that the 17th would be a date certain, but I don't think that would be appropriate.
If I said June 17th, or would you like to confirm that you can't give me a date today?
Chairman Klein, I can commit to you that we will aggressively work towards getting those files as soon as possible. My understanding is we have worked through a process of triaging, which I would think would help facilitate faster movement on the remaining files.
Okay. In one A file produced to the committee, an annotation was included that reads, consultation with the White House. Right there. Did the White House play any role in DHS's clearance process of this production?
I don't believe so, Congressman, but I would have to verify.
Okay, can you explain the annotation?
I cannot, and I'd be happy to take that back and get clarity on what that is.
Thank you, and we'd like to get that clarification immediately if possible. During this administration...
Mr. Chairman, is there like a Bates stamp number on the document there or something? I'd like to see the document as well.
It's in our possession. We'll make sure that we circulate that, but it's been provided by the witness to us, and so we have that. Sure, sure. During this administration, did the White House ever play any role in DHS's clearance process for any materials requested by the committee?
Congressman, as I stated in my opening statement, we work very hard to cooperate with the committee and work through the accommodations process while also balancing the executive branch's confidentiality interests. So I think, we are in constant communication across agencies, with the White House as the executive branch, but with respect to any one particular file or request, I wouldn't be in a position to answer that today.
Well, generally then, did the White House ever play any role? And you're telling me the answer is yes.
I think as a general matter, the Office of Legislative Affairs works with the Office of General Counsel and any individual components, and it does not, I would say, in my tenure, standard practice that if there is a production that's being requested, it goes much further than the department itself.
Okay, so I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Swalwell is recognized for 5 minutes.
In the Department of You Can't Make This Up, the chairman of the whole committee is approaching 700 days being out of compliance of a subpoena that was issued to him. He was a witness to one of the greatest crimes that has ever occurred in America, the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Spoke to the president at the time multiple times, was asked by a bipartisan committee investigating that crime, where hundreds of people have pleaded guilty, not were found guilty on their own, pleaded guilty. Others were found guilty. The chairman was asked to cooperate and tell the bipartisan investigators what he knew, and we're approaching 700 days in where he refuses to do that. So the fact that you are here, you are doing more than the chairman of the whole committee is willing to do. You're willing to answer questions and engage in a helpful dialogue. Would you agree, Secretary Buteau, that if the Republican majority would just prioritize for you what they needed, that would be more helpful than just sending scattershot subpoena requests?
Thank you, Ranking Member Swalwell. I think it is always helpful when we are able to triage and prioritize requests, particularly when an individual letter may request 10 different things that may live in 10 different places within the department. They do tend to start piling up.
And Secretary Agorn, would you agree? It is more helpful when you prioritize rather than hit send with a scattershot list of requests?
Ranking Member Swalwell, it is always helpful to understand the priorities of the committee. It is also helpful for us to be able to share back expectation setting based on those priorities.
And I know you're trying to do that. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I think they may be trying to draw the foul. I think the approach here is to over-request, to overkill on their search for documents and put you in an impossible position where you can't comply and they're unwilling to prioritize what they want. And then they bring you here and again, now it's the foul. You can't keep up with the overwhelming request of nonsense that's coming from them, and they won't prioritize, and then they want to try and dirty up the administration and say, well, they're not complying, they have something to hide. But actually, Secretary Buteau, from the requests that you've received, is it true 87 letters have come from just this committee?
Ranking Member Swalwell, that's correct.
And in response to those letters, the Department of Homeland Security has participated in 10 transcribed interviews, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And there are 2 additional interviews scheduled for the future, is that right?
That's correct.
And can you confirm that the records for individuals on the terrorist screening data set have been made available to this committee's staff for nearly 300 cases?
We have done in-camera review and briefings on that subject matter, and I know that this is an ongoing conversation, but I believe that number is accurate.
And Secretary Igorin, despite the majority's unwillingness to prioritize what they want, is it true that you've provided the committee with more than 12,000 pages of documents in response to their requests?
Congressman, we have provided 1,400 pages in production as well as an additional almost 4,000 pages of in-camera review. I would also like to emphasize in your terms of prioritization, the other thing is we have received inquiries from 17 different committees, both in the House and Senate. So when we talk about prioritization, it's prioritizing for this committee, but it's also understanding the larger context of oversight within the 118th Congress.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. Ranking Member Swalwell, man, he's good at it. You got to admit, right? He is really, really smooth. So we're going to look at the shiny object over here. We're going to talk about Clay Higgins, Chairman Jordan, James Comer, Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're going to talk about impeachment. We're going to talk about January 6th. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to talk about the Department of Justice going into traditional Roman Catholic churches. I'm not going to talk about our Department of Justice going into school boards. I'm not going to speak about the Russian collusion hoax and how it was untrue and the FBI was actually the one that colluded. I'm not going to speak about Biden's FBI director saying how dangerous things are here, his own director of the FBI, because of all the undocumented illegal individuals coming across. I'm not going to speak about Mayorkas, who is knowingly, purposefully. You want to talk about why he was impeached? That's why he's impeached, because he's allowed this to happen. I'm not going to speak about Joe Biden's meetings with Russian oligarchs. I'm not going to speak about his meetings with Burisma and his son's business or the Department of Justice working with President Biden and others to try to get a real big sweetheart deal that no other American would ever get for his son. No, let's stick to what it's about. Let's talk what this is about, because they want to pull us somewhere else. And let's be clear. When agencies delay or fail to comply with congressional subpoenas, they're obstructing our ability to legislate and address the issues affecting the citizens we serve, period. That's the purpose of this committee. That's why the chairman wisely called this meeting, because we want to know what's going on, because we represent the people of the United States of America. And when they fail to turn it over, and especially the documents relating to the southern border, they're delaying our ability to identify the many disasters that could occur, and quite frankly, the disasters that have been created by this administration. So let me talk about something. Ms. Buteau, thank you for being here. I'd like to specifically revisit a meeting on January 8th, 2024. Secretary Mayorkas, in a private meeting with Border Patrol, you know about it, admitted that more than 85% of illegal aliens encountered at the southwest border were being released into the country. That's a fact. Following the statements, the committee requested data about this alarming admittance by our own secretary. We requested it, we should get it. The American people should know. We wanted to know what's going on. Typical fashion, DHS refused to comply with these requests, and the committee was forced to issue a subpoena on April 17th, 2024. That's why we do subpoenas. It's unfortunate. Your department has assured us that it is committed to giving Congress timely, objective, and precise data on immigration enforcement. Earlier today, your staff communicated with our committee that it will be sending a production to the committee today. So I want to know, if it had it for weeks, it told the committee initially that we had to wait for 6 months. Why did it change now from weeks, and why do we have to wait to 6 months? Why are they available now and they wouldn't have been available before?
With respect to the 85% comment, I believe the department has spoken to that issue, as has the secretary. With respect to the request for information on that topic, my understanding is DHS staff and committee staff have been in conversations about producing what was requested in the subpoena, and we will continue to work through the accommodations process to get that.
Thank you for your answer. Ms. Buteau, but initially we're told 6 months, and the answer is on 85%. That's such an egregious statement to make, just aren't sufficient, and that's why we actually put forward a subpoena to get the real information. And by the way, and into something that tangentially I don't have enough time to talk about, Chairman Jordan, I think it was 2 years ago, asked where the individuals who are on the terror watch lists, who are they, where they are, what are they about, what do we know about them? We still haven't gotten that information, so let's understand it. Let's not look at the shiny object, look at the real world here. People on the terror watch list are in this country. We don't know where they are or who they are. We subpoenaed the information 2 years ago. We still don't have it. Why?
With respect to the TSDS, I understand that there is a great deal of interest in this. DHS is a user of the information that is on that list. We are not the owner of that information. We have been in constant communication with staff, and we will continue to do so.